Our next conversation today is with Democratic Representative Jason Crow of Aurora. Welcome back to Next.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Are you surprised that President Trump's attempt on social media to portray your words as seditious conspiracy actually got to the point that they brought it in front of a grand jury?
Well, what I am is appalled, like every Coloradan should be, that our Justice Department, their Justice Department, has been weaponized against Donald Trump's political opponents, right? The abuse of the system and the abuse of process is staggering and chilling. That our taxpayer dollars, our prosecutors and investigators are being used as a political weapon instead of to do things like investigate elder fraud or cyber crime or organized crime or violent crime. We are all worse off for this. And what's more is that the attempt to threaten and intimidate and bully me is just not going to work. They clearly don't know who I am. They clearly don't know that I will not be bullied.
Do you think they're going to try again with another grand jury?
They might. I mean, they did with Miss James. They might, right? And if you speak up against this administration, if you call out their corruption, you call out their abuses, you call out their lawlessness, they don't like that, right? So they try to come at people and they try to make examples of you, but I'm not going to be made an example of, right? I did 3 combat tours for this country, and I'm going to keep on fighting for this democracy.
Apologize for the interruption here. We just got a tiny lag. Do you have any legal recourse for what's happened so far?
Well, what I did, my lawyers sent a letter to the Department of Justice, to Pam Bondi, today, saying that if they continue this abusive process and this lawlessness, that there's going to be costs, right? We're just not going to sit back and allow them to continue to lob grenades our way and play defense. What's really important right now is we take names, we make lists, and we impose costs on people that have turned their back on the Constitution and the law, and we are prepared to do that.
You said that this isn't going to shut you up, but is it possible that this attempt to prosecute you and other members of Congress has actually had the intended effect that it will silence other critics of the president?
Well, I sure hope not, right? Donald Trump thinks that fear is contagious, and he's trying to send this message of fear to get people to shut up and to back down and to stop dissenting against power. What I believe, actually, is that courage is more contagious than fear. That if leaders stand up and they speak up and they don't allow themselves to be intimidated, that people will join with them. And I was a paratrooper that actually took the form of, the leader of the unit jumps first and then people follow. So I'm always going to jump first and I'm always going to go where the fight is. And I think people will follow and join with us.
The attempt to prosecute Letitia James, the attempt to prosecute James Comey, the attempt to prosecute you and other members of Congress, all have ended in humiliating defeats for the administration. Is there a chance that the public will write off the threat to the rule of law because the administration's attempts have been so bumbling?
That's not what I'm seeing happen around the country, Kyle. I've been recruiting that next generation of servant leaders around the nation to step up and to run for office and to help us fight and preserve our democracy. And instead, what I see happen is people are becoming emboldened, right? Folks are stepping up. They have, instead of getting people to succumb to fear and intimidation, instead, what they have done is actually awakened the courage, the fierceness, and the tenacity of everyday Americans who have seen the murders of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, who have seen masked, unmarked federal agents snatch American citizens off the street and deny them court hearings, who have seen them beat innocent civilians and protesters, who have now seen politically motivated prosecutions against elected officials, and people are pretty damn angry about it, as well they should be, and people are actually stepping up in pretty big numbers.
President Trump came after you because of a video that you and other veterans of the U.S. military and folks who have been in the intelligence community made, reiterating to service members that they do not have to follow illegal orders. I presume that you do not regret a word that you said in that video, but let me ask you, at this point in time, can you point to an illegal order given to the military by the president?
Well, first of all, I want to be clear about the video. The video was to get service members to start thinking about their obligation to the law and the Constitution based on Donald Trump's threats to use them unlawfully, right? He threatened to shoot protesters in Lafayette Square. He's threatened to send troops to polling stations, which would be a violation of U.S. criminal law. He's threatened to use the military to kill children and family members of terrorists, would be a violation of the Geneva Convention and would be murder under U.S. law. And if he carries through any of those things, then service members have an obligation to follow the law and the Constitution, not unlawful orders. And there's nothing sensational about this, as you point out. Right? This is drilled into you from the first days of boot camp. Every time I deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, I would run through these rules and regulations and their obligations with my soldiers before we deployed. So, yes, I would do this in a New York minute again if I had to, because this is not just my right, it's actually my duty. It's actually why the United States Congress exists, and that is to make sure that the government serves the American people, that it follows the law. That is called congressional oversight. So I'm deeply concerned about what this president has threatened to do. I'm deeply concerned about what I know to be unlawful deployments of the National Guard, right? Let's remember that courts have actually struck down some of those deployments, but I believe to be violations of U.S. law for several of the strikes in the Caribbean, and what is repeatedly the use of the U.S. military without congressional authorization.
So are you saying that those Guard members, say deployed to L.A., should have stood up to those orders, or the folks ordered to make those boat strikes in the Caribbean should have stood up to those orders because you believe them to be unlawful?
No, the important distinction here, Kyle, is between operations and orders for missions and large operations, which need to be litigated in court. They need to be subject to congressional oversight and authority, right? That is our responsibility. That is my responsibility. Versus the responsibility of that individual soldier or sailor or airman on the ground. If they're asked to shoot, they're asked to do something that would be unlawful or a violation of their duty, they have a different obligation to make sure that they're following the law, right? And what's important about the video and what I learned in combat is you can't wait until soldiers are in the position that of making split-second decisions, right? To shoot or not shoot, or to do something or not do something, where you can't be there with them, right? You have to train them in advance. You have to set the conditions in advance, and you have to remind them who they are and where their obligations lie.
Congressman, we have just a couple of minutes remaining. President Trump has mused about the idea of federalizing elections. There are MAGA allies of his that have talked about the idea of sending ICE agents or members of the military to polling locations. We know that there was talk in 2020, musings about the idea of the military gaining access to ballots. Question: if President Trump attempted to use the military to seize ballots or otherwise gain control of elections, do you believe that that would be an obviously illegal order?
Yeah, use of military at polling stations or interfere with our elections would be a violation of the law, and I will do everything to enforce the law and to prevent that from happening. Donald Trump has repeatedly made reference to and alluded to stealing the election or trying to stack the deck in his favor. So now is the time to be vigilant. Now is the time for Americans to stand up and say enough is enough. We demand our democracy. We demand our right to vote, and we're not going to allow Donald Trump to abuse the process and use the United States government in the authority and the vast power of the presidency to silence Americans and to prevent them from exercising their right to vote. We simply won't stand for it.
And lastly, Congressman, your Republican colleagues in Congress have made it clear that they will follow any order from President Trump, and it does not appear that there is a lot of pushback within the executive branch that existed within his first term. What do you see as the functional fireballs at this point for the rule of law?
The American people, right? Listen, this is not the story about, corporate CEOs, universities, big law firms, people in positions of power and privilege bending the knee and cowing and buckling to Donald Trump, because when societies face crisis like we are in right now, there are always people in positions of power and influence who fail. This is going to be a story of the American people, everyday Americans, standing up and exercising their courage and their right and taking their country back. That's what this moment is going to be about. And I have a lot of confidence that the American people are doing just that.
Congressman Jason Crow of Aurora, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.